It's been almost 1 year since attorney Dan Boles was elected to James Island Town Council as a town council member. I speak exclusively with Dan for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Dan Boles, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks for having me again, Quintin. It's good to see you.
Likewise. Obviously, me and you spoke for Quintin's Close-Ups almost a year ago when you were elected to James Island Town Council. What has changed about the town of James Island since you became town council member?
Well, you know, I don't think there's been any drastic changes, but I do think that town council has taken a slightly modified direction, I guess, since the last election. We have been, well, my focus really has been on getting James Island's power lines put underground and getting our ditches cleared out. I learned after being elected, for example, that there are a lot of drainage easements and ditches on James Island that have probably not been touched in decades. So that's a long way of answering your question to say that I think since the election, council has turned a lot more attention towards things like drainage and the power grid.
And I want to get to that in just a second. You talked earlier about obviously the modified direction that town council has turned to. What direction should it be?
Well, someone, I can't take credit for this idea, but when I was running, I ran into a gentleman whose name I forget, who said small government should focus on sidewalks, safety, streetlights, and sewers. And I didn't really understand what he meant when he said it, but having sat through council meetings and fielded emails from residents of James Island, I do agree with that statement now. So to me, council and the town's role really for the town of James Island is to take care of those items. Those are kind of the like the infrastructure and really leave a lot of other issues to, you know, county government or state government. We're really there to take care of people during hurricane season, make sure that everyone's yards are as dry as they can be and that our streets aren't flooded, and keep public safety in a good spot. And that's what I think town council is supposed to focus on: sidewalk safety, streetlights, and sewers.
And you talk about that, obviously hurricanes, because you said this on your Facebook page on, I believe it's August 2nd. You said this quote: "Hurricanes are back. Please write to the town to support undergrounding power lines and cleaning ditches." Let me ask you this, Dan. Undergrounding power lines. Would you replace wood poles with steel or concrete or composite ones?
I would not replace the poles with any other poles. I think the smartest move is to do what many other places in the country, in the world have done, which is just put your power grid underground. Then you don't need power lines. One of, you know, James Island's most beautiful features are all the big old trees that we have. And those big, beautiful old trees lean and fall on power lines when the winds get high. So if we were to simply remove power lines from the poles and bore them underground, not only would it update the infrastructure itself, because the metal, I didn't think about this before, but the metal in the power lines that are overhead, the metal itself is old. So not only would it update our grid, but it would remove it from interaction with trees, which is why our power generally goes out during hurricanes. And as a side effect, a nice side effect of that, we don't have to trim trees anymore. And that's a big issue on the island too, whenever the power company comes through and starts trimming trees and cuts them, you know, in kind of a drastic fashion. It looks terrible. People don't like it. So it would take care of both of those matters.
And you talk about that drastic fashion. Where are we right now with the cutting down trees on James Island?
From what I can tell, they've done a lot of the cutting for this year already. Okay. For instance, I live on Foxcroft Road, and there's a corridor, I call it, in the backyard of myself and my neighbors, and they came through maybe 2 months ago and cut all of the underbrush and a certain amount of feet on either side of it was cut down. They've also done, I think they've hit Fort Johnson Road and Dills Bluff Road. So the Foxcroft corridor, which is in backyards, doesn't register to the public because you don't see it as much. But Dills Bluff and Fort Johnson, which are really scenic and beautiful roads, people notice immediately, and our inboxes start flooding immediately when they cut there. The town has hired an arborist to help consult, I guess, with Dominion Power.
Right.
But the tricky thing with the arborist is that oftentimes it's remedial. So he's not there ahead of time helping them plan their cuts. The power company comes through. Sometimes they hire contractors to do the job for them. And so being remedial is kind of not where we want to be, right? We want to prevent it rather than try to go back and fix it after the problem happens. So I hope that answers your question.
Oh, no worries at all. Has the town actually spoken with Dominion Energy to find out some sort of ideal schedule where the arborists as well as the Dominion Energy employees can be on the same page as far as scheduling to take down those trees, or cutting those trees, I should say?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The answer is yes. Town staff mostly talks with the power company about when and where they're going to cut, about keeping Dominion in touch with our arborist. We also hired a couple of backup arborists just in case our primary is not available and we need someone at the drop of a hat to come out. We have a couple other options on board. It's just a balancing act, though, right, between the town and the residents' desires for retaining the look and the character and the beauty of James Island versus the power company's desire to maintain a healthy grid, which is important. It's important that we have electricity, and balancing those two things with the way the power lines are run right now is really tricky. And but to answer your question, the town staff do talk with Dominion about trying to strike that balance as best they can. And I think that the town staff deserves a lot of credit for the work that they do in that area.
And you talked earlier about those options. What options are ideal right now?
Can you remind me what options I was talking about?
Oh, no worries. I know that obviously you have options. You have your on the spot opportunists that come out on the fly whenever they need to. And you said the town has other options. What are those, and what's exactly ideal?
I got you, for the arborist. So
yes,
we have a primary person whose name escapes me right now.
Oh, no worries.
But he is our primary arborist who would talk with the power company. The goal being he'd do it prospectively so that they plan appropriately. But as I said, I think that sometimes they use contractors to come out, and those people may not have been in the room when the planning conversations were happening. So we have, I think, 2 or 3 other arborists kind of on call with the town, so that if we need someone, if we find out maybe that the power company is appears to be deviating from the plan, we have someone at the drop of a hat, hopefully, who can come out and steer them back to the plan.
And what is that plan, Dan?
It's the multi-million-dollar question. I know that with trimming trees around the power lines, there are certain ways that the trees can be cut in certain seasons that you want to cut them, right, that will maintain, or at least it was supposed to maintain the health of the trees, or at least not adversely affect them as badly. And then there are other ways, if you just came through, for instance, and just clear cut, that can cause issues for the trees. And that's again a problem for maintaining the character and the beauty of James Island, but it's also a problem in the future for the power company, because if you have too many dead trees along the power lines, they start to fall. They don't hold up when the hurricanes come through. And so making sure that the trees are healthy is important, not just for the look, but also for the function of the power lines. And that's why it matters.
And let me get back to obviously undergrounding power lines. That is, let me ask you this too, Dan. Would you reinforce utility poles with, say, guy wires?
Right now, I think that spending any money on utility poles is not ideal. I think that enforcing them with guy wires would be a sort of band-aid for the problem. I think that boring the power lines underground and removing power poles completely is the solution. So I don't think that spending any money to prop up an antiquated power grid would be a wise way to spend people's money.
And how much reduced accessibility to power lines will they be?
Can you tell me what you mean by that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, how much reduced accessibility that is to the power lines will it be? Will it be any? How much access will it be?
Do you mean for the power company? Like,
yes, right.
How would they be able to maintain it? So, to use the Foxcroft corridor again as an example.
Okay.
Sorry, on my phone.
Worries.
Let me start that over. To use the Foxcroft corridor as an example, there's an easement for each of the property owners where we have to allow the power company access to our backyard, and then there's an easement under the power lines that they have to be able to get to that area. So you can't plant things or put up a wall or anything like that. Those easements, I believe, would remain as they are. So if the power company needed to access the underground power lines, they would be able to do it much in the same way that they access the overheads. They would come to their right-of-way or their easement, and rather than use a bucket truck and go up in the air overhead, they would simply excavate the problem area on the spot.
Wow. And will this make the power lines more susceptible, say, to, from obviously damage from storm surge or flooding?
They, my understanding of the process, and I'm learning about this still, but my understanding is that they encase the power lines in something to protect them from the things that you're talking about, right? It would be very problematic if they were susceptible to floodwaters and things like that. If you look at many of our surrounding municipalities are good examples. I know Goose Creek has a lot of underground power lines. Any place where there's, just really a lot of the other municipalities that you look at, there's underground power lines, and to my knowledge, they don't experience problems such as what you're asking about. So the technology associated with how they put them underground safeguards against those things.
And how difficult will it be to repair the system, obviously underground, when outages do occur?
So, my understanding, again, I'm a lawyer, not a power line guy, but I have tried to read up on this as much as I can. My understanding is that replacing the lines should result in fewer needs for repairs to the lines. The example before my phone blanked out there I was giving was like old Christmas tree lights,
right.
And the metal that's in the overhead power lines now is really, really old. If you ever take time and look up at overhead power lines, sometimes you'll notice these areas of little thickness. They're called splices. That's where the line has frayed or split, and they just go back and like stick it together with a splice that holds it in place.
Wow.
They don't replace the line. I mean, the lines themselves are rarely pulled and replaced. So by putting them underground. We're not talking about taking the same metal in the overhead lines and sticking it under the ground. We're talking about replacing it with modern power lines. And the materials I've read up on this, which are mostly supplied by Dominion Power and other power companies I've looked at just on the internet, it looks like the need for repair and things is a lot less than it is in the older overhead lines that we have now.
And what vegetation management practices would be in place?
With an undergrounded system, I don't think you have to worry a whole lot about vegetation management. From my conversations, which is completely anecdotal, right? And I hate to provide anecdotal information to someone like you in this kind of setting, but my understanding is that when they bore the power lines, they don't dig a ditch and then lay the power lines underground. They bore it side. They go in from the side and they bore, and they aren't interfered with by tree roots or anything like that would grow into it. The power company is able to put them underground in such a way that they are generally undisturbed. And so I don't think that we would need vegetation management. We certainly wouldn't need vegetation management that we have now where they go and cut the tree branches.
Okay. Let me ask you a simplistic question. Is this shifting risk?
Is it shifting risk from overhead to underground?
Yes, sir.
I can tell you what I see as the risk right now with overhead power lines is the same thing that all James Island residents experience: is frequent outages and sometimes lengthy outages.
Wow.
I know that there have been times in past hurricane seasons where parts of the town are without electricity for a week or more. And so I would answer your question to say that I don't think it's shifting from one. I don't think we're shifting from one area to another. I think we're kind of eliminating a lot of the risk. Electricity, the lack of electricity, for example, for someone with medical needs related to equipment they have to run in their house is real for people. That came up with Isaias when it came through. I had someone contact me who had medical equipment in their home, and they were scared to death about losing power because it really is a life or death matter for them. We all know how hot it stays here in October and November, and to take away electricity from people during that time, it's more than just an inconvenience for some folks. For some people, it is a matter of health and well-being. So I don't think it's shifting the risk from anyone. I think it is reducing the risk that we currently face.
Let me stay in the town, because obviously we're all dealing with the coronavirus outbreak. With the COVID situation that is affecting the local economy so badly, let me ask you this, Dan. How has it affected revenues that the town needs to fund projects?
So it has taken away some from the town revenue, not a ton directly. The town decided to defer collection, for instance, of small business tax revenues to help the small businesses on the island. I don't think we've eliminated it. I don't think we've forgiven it, but we just deferred it. So being that we are a small government and we have, between 12 and 13,000 residents, I think, in a small collection of businesses within the town limits, I see our role, and I think the rest of council and the town staff sees our role as helping the residents and the business owners, rather than we're not as concerned about bringing money from them to us as we are about helping them. So to answer your question, we have seen a reduction in some of the revenues that they collect, but we simply just made adjustments so that the town could function just fine and could give a break to residents and business owners.
And you talk about that break. How long will this deferment happen?
That's a good question. You know, I can't remember. I can't remember when it's set to expire or if it already has expired. But I do recall having conversations with other members of council about whether to extend it and what we were going to do with, you know, how much of it to collect and when. Everybody, from what I can tell, most places are still facing a reduction in earnings because of the coronavirus. So again, I view the town's role to support its residents and support its businesses, not the other way around, right? The residents and the businesses are not there to prop up the town. So if we need to operate at a reduction, or we need to figure out a way to tighten the belt, that's what the town's role is to support its residents and its business owners.
And what do revenues look like right now in the town?
I wish you'd asked me. I wish you told me that before you put it on the camera. I've got I can get the spreadsheet. We just passed the budget for July.
Okay.
I can tell you some very broad brushstroke numbers. I think that the town brings in roughly $3 million in revenues from multiple sources. And then some of our larger items that we spend money on are one that we just approved was a $900,000 payment to the Public Service District. And that is intended to offset taxes for the residents. So we pay part of each resident's Public Service District bill with some of that money. Okay. We also are looking at, on the agenda this month, we'll be talking about purchasing a backhoe or some heavy equipment that hopefully will help with clearing ditches. So we'll own the equipment so that hopefully when residents call and have a problem in a specific area, we can just send someone there to deal with it. Right now, we're having to ask for help from other governments, and of course that creates a lot of delay. We're also, you know, and with the undergrounding issue we were talking about, there's a cost sharing arrangement with Dominion Power. I don't think the town has put aside a lot of money for it yet, but that's one of my goals, is to start identifying places where we can save money and spend it on things like that. And that's, again, broad brushstrokes of what I remember off the top of my head with our current budget.
And let me ask you two questions. You talked about, obviously, the $900,000 you all have to set aside for the Public Service District. How much is okay, let me ask you this. The average resident, how much do they pay to the Public Service District every year?
That's a good question. It has, okay, so Public Service District, and I'm sure that if any of them see this, I'm not going to say this right. So apologies to the PSD in advance for maybe mischaracterizing this, but they deal with our solid waste, you know, our trash and recycling removal, or our trash removal, sorry, sewage, and a lot of, you know, some of the drainage and things like that relates to the Public Service District as well. Now, how much does the average resident have to pay for those services? Some of it depends on, like the sewage, for instance, I think is tied to how much water you consume. Yeah, right. Everyone pays roughly the same for solid waste removal. I have asked for a bill, kind of what you're saying is, you know, what are our 12 to 13,000 residents bill? And I haven't gotten it yet. No one said that you can't have it. I think it's just for them to parse out because they service the entire island, right?
Right.
So that's the county, the city,
Right.
unincorporated county, the city, and the town. To get them to parse that out is not something that's readily on hand, from what I can tell.
Okay.
But maybe next time you and I talk, I'll have that accounting, and we can dive deeper into it.
And you talk about, obviously the town should be setting aside money for Dominion. What are we talking? $50,000 here?
It's a lot more than that.
Okay.
From my conversations with town staff and with Dominion, it costs about $300 per foot to put a power line underground. Right now, the cost sharing agreement with Dominion is on some sort of 5-year rolling basis. So if we don't spend our matching eligibility within 5 years, we lose that 5th year and we start over, I believe. So as we sit here now, my understanding is that they will match up to $328,000 and some change. So if we could come up with that amount of money, that's how much they would match, for a total of about $657,000 towards undergrounding power lines. And then that would zero us out, and we would have to accumulate credit with them again over time. I don't think we have that money right now, but again, my hope is to identify funds like that we can get to them. So $50,000, any amount of money is a dollar put towards this, I think, is a dollar well spent. And I would certainly welcome $50,000 to put towards it, because that would give us $100,000 worth of lines to go underground. But it's a lot more expensive than that. Now, just bear in mind, my position on this is that this money, once spent, we won't really have to spend it again. It's a heavy upfront cost, but then our kids will benefit from it. They won't have to pay for this kind of stuff again.
Where could the funds potentially come from?
I don't know that there's any additional funding than what the town already receives, although again, staff deserves a lot of credit for researching these things at our request, but they have been looking at grants and, can we identify other sources in addition to what we already get that would go towards this? Because to me, it's a sort of hurricane mitigation step. It's, you can get FEMA money after a disaster to pay for repairs, but I like the old adage that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If there is a way to avoid asking the federal government for a ton of money by on the other hand, asking them for a little bit of money to help with some preventative measures, I'd like to find it. To answer your question, I don't know where it is. I don't know if it's out there, but we're looking for it. Right now, with the money that we get, our annual revenue, we operate in the black, so to speak. We carry a surplus, so we don't spend more. We're not operating in a deficit in the red, but we really would need to do this right, and to spend the level of money it would take to do it right. It would be really helpful to identify some new sources of revenue.
Let me ask you this. What's that surplus looking like now during this whole coronavirus outbreak?
We talked about this at a recent meeting. We took some money from our general fund, and I'd be happy to research this and give you a more full explanation, but I know we took money that was left over from last year to apply to this year because of the reduced revenue related to the coronavirus. Now, how much it was, I think it was on the order of 150,000 maybe that we carried over, but I really would have to defer to the minutes from that meeting note, which I can find for you and tell you.
And as we talk about this, obviously, health outbreak, I know this might be a tough question, Dan, but testing versus infection. How many testing cases are there in the town? and how many are actually infection cases?
The DHEC website, I haven't checked it today. I had it always on my phone. I would just hit refresh during March, April, May, June. And then I honestly just got burnt out on looking at it all the time. It was causing stress and anxiety for me. They do have by zip code the statistics that you're asking for. We don't, but the town does not have its own zip code, right? 29412 is James Island, the geographic island. Right. I'm not aware, not to say it's not out there, but I'm not aware of any statistics related only to the 12 to 13,000 town residents that we have. There are statistics for James Island related to that. And your follow-up probably is, well, what are those numbers? And I quite honestly, since we enacted the mask requirement on the town, and since the city did it, the county, right, Folly Beach, and also with the Folly Beach parking restrictions, which I hear a lot about from James Island residents. And so I hear you out there if you happen to watch this later. But those measures over the last, I'm going to say 4 weeks, seem to be finally contributing to a decline on James Island. But I can't tell you offhand what the numbers are. I honestly quit looking a little while ago because it was causing me so much anxiety, and it just didn't seem to really it wasn't helping me to look at them.
What's the average age of people on James Island with the infection, and is that average getting lower?
Are more young people being infected? I think maybe it would be a way to rephrase your question. I don't know what the average age of positive cases are on James Island, but my earlier tracking of DHEC's data to me looked like we were much like the rest of the country and the world, in that we started out with more positive tests showing in older residents. And as time has gone by, that trend has become younger and younger. As we sit here, I don't know what the 29412 average age is of positive test results. But I do know that according to DHEC's data, it looks like the average age across James Island, just like elsewhere, has gotten younger over time.
And I just got this text message from Representative-elect Spencer Wetmore. I was trying to get a quick interview with her today, but she's burnt out, so she can't do it. But obviously, she's now the representative-elect for House District 115. Let me ask you this, Dan. What issues do you want to work with Representative Wetmore on?
Well, I like to see the state contribute some funds to what we talked about earlier with undergrounding power lines and with our ditches. We are, the Low Country is a revenue generating area for the entire state as far as tourism money, right, and things like that. So keeping this area, not everyone understands that lives here, right? Keeping it nice and pretty and functional is to the benefit of the rest of the state of South Carolina. So one thing that I would hope we could get would be assistance with those preventative measures from Columbia. And
I hope to interview her in September for that particular on those issues, and I'll get you some answers as well.
don't grill her too hard. Spencer's a really smart lawyer, yes, and I think she's going to do a great job where she is. I'm happy to see that she won.
And hopefully we'll be hearing more from her in the coming days.
Okay.
Councilman Dan Boles, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Always a pleasure to see you, Quintin, and to talk to you, and stay safe and sane.
Sure. And I'll see you downtown around here.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Bye.
Bye.